There was a wave and a thumbs up as paratroopers emerged from their firefight in the jungle today.
Scary experience. I don't like to talk too much about that sort of situation. You know, it was a very scary experience until you got into the battle and then the training took over.
There literally are no finer armed forces anywhere in the world.
11 British soldiers have been kidnapped by an armed gang in Sierra Leone. The troops from the Royal Irish Regiment went missing yesterday afternoon, and it's thought they're being held by a militia group called the West Side Boys. The men were patrolling outside Freetown, the capital of Sierra Leone, when they were captured together with 3 military Land Rovers.
The British soldiers were seized by this renegade faction known as the West Side Boys, just one of the armed gangs struggling for power and influence in a country torn by civil war. The men of the Royal Irish Regiment are part of a 250-strong British detachment training government troops. They were seized on their way to meet UN forces 40 miles from the capital, Freetown.
Contact has been made, and I can confirm that all the members of the Royal Irish are alive and well and being well treated.
2/3 of Sierra Leone is under the control of the main rebel group, the RUF, in a conflict fuelled by the lucrative diamond trade. But experts say the West End boys are motivated by money, not politics.
They have nothing at the moment other than living off their guns, and as long as the United Nations peacekeeping force is extending across there, their opportunity for fighting, rape, pillage is diminished.
The British presence has been scaled down since their arrival in May to evacuate UK nationals, but it's been a difficult mission. Last month, Major Andrew Harrison was freed after a dramatic rescue from the rebels.
Tonight, defence officials are hopeful the hostages will be released through negotiation rather than force. But their capture will again raise questions about Britain's role in what is a chaotic and highly dangerous environment. John Ray.
At the Royal Irish Regiment's home barracks in Kent, there is relief that contact has been made with the 11 soldiers held captive. Major John Douglas was in Sierra Leone when the rebels seized his colleagues. He says a senior officer on the ground spoke briefly by radio to one of the captured men. They are in good health, but in the hands of an unpredictable group.
Obviously, this is a very worrying time for us all. My knowledge of the grouping is that they're an unpredictable grouping, so we are concerned. They're very young, some of them are child soldiers. They're quite a volatile grouping, but the commanding officer assures me that robust communications has been established with them. However, all these soldiers have been well trained for their deployment. They've been trained for such an incident as this, so we're confident that they'll come through as best as possible.
The Royal Irish Regiment remains optimistic that it can win the men's release by negotiation. It's understood that 2 highly trained hostage negotiation officers from the Metropolitan Police are on the ground in Sierra Leone, and of course the SAS are there too, ready to use force if all else fails.
Obviously, a negotiated settlement for the return of these troops would be the ideal solution to this problem. But if that can't be achieved, we shouldn't rule out the use of military force.
Right, slightly lower, yeah, you're going over his head.
As Sierra Leone's latest hostage crisis continued, soldiers from the Royal Irish Regiment were working as normal today, training army recruits to fight the rebels. Officers here say the 11 men being held captive are well prepared for such an ordeal.
They are an experienced group. They've served operationally recently in Kosovo and in Northern Ireland, and considerable amount of training, some of that training actually in Africa. So I've got no worries at all that they'll be perfectly capable of looking after themselves.
This is the base at Benguema where the British troops are stationed and where Sierra Leone's government army is prepared for battle. Everyone here seems confident that the hostages will soon be released unharmed. But what's happened has once again underlined the unpredictability of Sierra Leone and the dangers faced by troops operating here. Negotiators meeting rebels in the jungle beyond the capital Freetown have now been able to talk directly to some of the hostages. And their physical condition is okay?
Yes, they're all not only in good well-being, but also in very good spirits.
Tonight the negotiating goes on, and so does the waiting. Tim Ewart, ITN, Benguema, Sierra Leone. The 5 freed soldiers are aboard a British supply ship in the Sierra Leone capital, Freetown. They're described as fit and well. No details of their ordeal will be made public until all the hostages are released and military debriefings complete. The 5 were taken first to the Royal Irish Regiment's jungle base. They'd left here last Friday before being captured by a rebel group called the West Side Boys. There remain questions about where the soldiers were going and what they were doing when they were captured. The UN has expressed unease about a lack of liaison. But those issues are secondary now as negotiations continue to free the remaining 6 British hostages.
We will leave no stone unturned in all our efforts to try and make sure we get them back to where they belong, back with the battalion.
As the waiting continued, it emerged that the West Side Boys had been handed an army satellite phone as part of a deal to free the first 5 men. The group used the phone to give a radio interview. At the same time, British officials revealed that 1 hostage had been beaten up. As negotiations drag on, there is inevitably mounting speculation about a military solution, some sort of rescue operation.
A British paratrooper has been killed in a rescue mission to save 6 soldiers held hostage in Sierra Leone. 12 other British troops were hurt, 1 seriously. The hostages are tonight all safe on board a Royal Navy ship. 25 of their captors were killed. The attack took place about 50 miles east of the capital, Freetown. The hostages were being held in a village north of Rokel Creek. About 150 paratroopers attacked the rebel camp there by helicopter and at the same time raided another rebel stronghold south of the river. Defence experts believe special forces were involved in leading the operation. Tim Ewart reports from Sierra Leone.
There was a wave and a thumbs up as paratroopers emerged from their firefight in the jungle today. The road to the scene of their battle was sealed to all but military traffic. The only information about what happened carefully controlled by senior officers and the Ministry of Defence.
At 6:30 this morning, just before first light, an operation was launched by the British military forces here in Sierra Leone to secure the release of the 7 hostages that were held by the West Side Boys. That operation is still ongoing. However, we can say that the hostages are all alive and back safely in British hands.
It was described as a joint operation involving all 3 arms of the military. RAF Hercules transport aircraft flew the paras to an airfield beside one of the many UN bases here. Helicopters patrolled the skies over the area controlled by the West Side Boys, the rebel band who seized the hostages 2 weeks ago. And the Navy frigate Argyle, prowling coastal waters for several weeks now, was also involved. The freed hostages were brought to the supply ship Sir Percival, where clean uniforms had been laid out in cabins set aside to house them.
I've talked to them all. I've sat amongst them. They were all dressed in uniform as I am. They have been through an ordeal. They are tired. They will recover.
The hostages were held beside this river, and there was fierce fighting on both banks after what's believed to have been an amphibious attack. As vehicles were searched at roadblocks for fleeing West Side Boys, it emerged that 25 had been killed and 18 captured. The West Side Boys may have suffered a heavy defeat, but some are undoubtedly still at large and still heavily armed.
The West Side Boys were not a pushover. They fought very hard, and amongst them they had women who were fighting, and I think some of them may be amongst the casualties. A number of prisoners were taken, and initial reports indicate that these include the self-styled Brigadier Calais.
Speaking in London before the confirmation of one British death, the Prime Minister praised those involved in the rescue.
I cannot pay high enough tribute to the skill, the professionalism and above all the courage of the armed forces involved. I think we can feel immense pride in Britain that we have armed forces capable of carrying out such a task. There literally are no finer armed forces anywhere in the world.
The true scale of the battle waged by the paras to free their comrades is emerging all the time. It now seems that the firefight lasted for 2 hours and it was 6 hours before all British forces were withdrawn.
Scary experience. I don't like to talk too much about that sort of situation. You know, it was a very scary experience until you got into the battle and then the training took over.
We're very proud to have been asked to take part in the operation and be of some assistance to secure the hostages.
The company is a very young company, and none of us have experienced a two-way range, as we call it, where rounds are coming your way before.
After the Barras had been flown to Sierra Leone and taken by helicopter to the West Side Boys' hideout, which is on a river, some had to wade up to their chests in water for 500 metres while under fire from the hostage takers. Hiding in the jungle, the SAS reportedly reached the hostages before the Barras. After 20 minutes, a helicopter was ferrying the 6 to a supply ship, Sir Percival.
They looked pretty bedraggled. They obviously hadn't shaved for 2 weeks. Their uniforms were muddied and very matted, and they didn't smell very nice. But
well, they're all in much better spirits than they were yesterday. They arrived back from the operation physically and emotionally exhausted. They were given the chance yesterday to rest, to relax a bit. They all managed to talk to their families. They're obviously very relieved to hear their voices and know that they're safe and well.
The West Side Boys have been a law unto themselves. They were supposed to be on the side of the Sierra Leone government, opposed to the rebels, just like the British. Their reverse yesterday may bring them back into line, though there are fears of reprisals. But where does the raid leave British policy? Under Operation Palliser, British forces arrived in May to safeguard Freetown. A fortnight later, 800 Royal Marines relieved the Barras. The Marines themselves pulled out in June, though they left 200 men behind to train the Sierra Leone army, an apparent change of policy. The Foreign Secretary praised the Barras and expressed his condolences to the family of the dead servicemen.
I'm greatly relieved that all the British hostages have been safely rescued. I'm immensely impressed by the professionalism and the discipline with which the British troops have carried out the action. And I'm deeply saddened by the death of a paratrooper who was killed rescuing his colleagues. The United Nations is not there to gain ground from the rebels. That will be the job of the Army of Sierra Leone. The United Nations task is to make sure that that ground is then occupied by them, peace is established there, stability is established there, in order that the army can continue its forward movement. Now, our role is to train that army to carry out that task. That's what we're doing.
But the Tories say the UN mission is failing and British troops remain vulnerable. The Barras' immediate task is over, but the scope and duration of the British mission as a whole remains uncertain.